Most people believe that mental strength is about pushing through pain, about gritting your teeth and forcing yourself forward no matter what. They are wrong. True mental discipline is not about force at all. It is about discernment, about knowing when to act and when to yield, when to speak and when to remain silent. It is the quiet art of choosing your battles not with your emotions, but with your reason. And this difference, this single distinction, separates those who endure from those who transcend. Within the next 12 minutes, you will encounter a framework for mental discipline that has nothing to do with motivation and everything to do with clarity. You will learn why the strongest minds are not the loudest, why suffering can be a choice, and how the ancient philosophers discovered a method for inner peace that modern psychology is only now beginning to understand. This is not about becoming tougher. It is about becoming wiser. Consider this. Every morning, you wake to a world that demands your attention, your energy, your emotional labor. Messages flood your phone. Responsibilities pile upon your desk. People need things from you. And somewhere beneath all of that noise, you feel it. A quiet exhaustion, a sense that you are always reacting, never truly choosing. The Stoics called this being enslaved to externals. You believe you are free because you make 1,000 small decisions each day. But in truth, you are being decided for you by circumstances, by other people's urgencies, by the tyranny of the urgent over the important. Mental discipline begins the moment you recognize this trap. Here is the first reversal. Weakness is not the absence of strength. Weakness is the presence of too many masters. When you try to please everyone, control everything, avoid all discomfort, you scatter your power across 1,000 fronts and become effective on none. The undisciplined mind believes it must respond to everything. The disciplined mind knows that most things do not deserve a response at all. Epictetus, who was born a slave and became one of the most influential philosophers in history, taught that freedom is not about changing your circumstances. It is about changing what you allow to disturb you. He asked a simple question that most people never consider. Why do you give other people and external events the power to ruin your peace? Think of the last time someone insulted you or treated you unfairly. What happened inside you? Perhaps anger, perhaps hurt, perhaps a desperate need to defend yourself or correct their perception. Now ask yourself, did that person reach inside your chest and manually trigger those emotions? Or did you generate them in response to their words? The truth, uncomfortable as it may be, is that you did. They provided the stimulus. You provided the suffering. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who ruled an empire yet spent his evenings writing to himself about virtue and tranquility, understood this deeply. He wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. But let us bring this into the texture of your actual life. Imagine you are passed over for a promotion you believed you deserved. The immediate reaction for most people is a spiral. Bitterness, self-doubt, resentment toward the person who was chosen instead. The undisciplined mind takes this event and builds an entire narrative of failure around it. The disciplined mind pauses. It asks, what is actually within my control here? Not the decision that was made, not other people's opinions, but your effort, your learning, your response. The disciplined mind does not deny the disappointment. It simply refuses to be defined by it. It converts the event into data rather than identity. Here is the second reversal. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. You have heard this before, perhaps dismissed it as a platitude. But consider what it truly means. Pain is the raw sensation of life. Loss, fatigue, illness, failure. These are facts of existence. Suffering, however, is what happens when you resist pain, when you add layers of interpretation, when you say, this should not be happening to me. The Stoics practiced a mental exercise called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Before important events, they would imagine everything that could go wrong. Not to become pessimistic, but to remove the shock of adversity. Because when you have already considered failure, when you have already accepted the possibility of loss, you are no longer at its mercy. Modern psychology has rediscovered this principle under different names: exposure therapy, stress inoculation, resilience training. But the mechanism is ancient. The mind that anticipates difficulty is not weakened by that anticipation. It is fortified. Think of a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. She does not visualize only success. She mentally rehearses every complication, every contingency. So when something goes wrong, her hands do not shake. She has already been there in her mind. This is not pessimism. This is preparedness. And preparedness is a form of respect. Respect for reality, for complexity, for the limits of your control. Now consider the opposite approach, the one most of us were taught. We are told to think positively, to visualize success, to believe everything will work out. And when it does not, when reality intrudes with its indifference to our expectations, we collapse. Because we built our inner world on hope rather than on acceptance. The disciplined mind does not reject hope. It simply does not depend on it. It says, I will work toward the best outcome, but I will not be destroyed by the worst. This is not cynicism. It is freedom. Here is where philosophy meets the mundane details of your everyday existence. You are stuck in traffic. You are running late for something important. The undisciplined mind escalates. Frustration, anger at other drivers, at yourself for not leaving earlier, at the universe for its apparent conspiracy against you. The disciplined mind observes the same situation and asks, what is within my control right now? Not the traffic, not time itself, but your breathing, your thoughts, your decision about what this moment means. Seneca, who served as advisor to emperors yet wrote extensively about the inner life, said that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. The traffic is not torturing you. Your narrative about the traffic is. Let us shift now to a different dimension of mental discipline. The ability to sit with discomfort without immediately seeking escape. We live in an age of infinite distraction. Boredom, loneliness, anxiety. Any uncomfortable feeling can be medicated instantly with a screen, a substance, a shallow pleasure. The undisciplined mind has become dependent on this. It has lost the capacity to simply be with itself. The Stoics spent considerable time in what they called voluntary discomfort, deliberately choosing hardship to train the mind. Seneca would sleep on a hard floor, eat plain food, wear simple clothes not because he could not afford luxury, but because he wanted to prove to himself that he did not need it. He was rehearsing poverty so that the fear of poverty could no longer control him. You do not need to sleep on floors to practice this. But ask yourself, when was the last time you sat in silence for 10 minutes without reaching for your phone? When did you last feel bored and chose to remain bored rather than immediately distracting yourself? When did you last feel anxious and simply observed the anxiety rather than trying to fix it or flee from it? These small acts of sitting with discomfort are the gymnasium of mental discipline. Because every time you resist the urge to escape, you are proving to yourself that you can tolerate more than you thought. You are expanding your capacity. This brings us to the heart of the matter. Before we continue deeper into this exploration, I want to invite you to do something small but meaningful. If this conversation is resonating with you, if you sense that these ideas might help you navigate your inner world with more clarity, consider subscribing to this channel. And more importantly, leave a comment sharing one area of your life where you feel you need more mental discipline. Not for me, but for yourself. Because the act of naming the struggle is the first step in transcending it. This is a space for serious reflection, and your voice matters here. Now let us return. We have established that mental discipline is not about force but about discernment, that suffering is often self-imposed, and that discomfort can be a teacher rather than an enemy. But there is a deeper layer still, one that addresses not just how you respond to life, but how you interpret your own existence within it. The Stoics believed that the greatest human capacity is the ability to choose your perspective. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps, later wrote that everything can be taken from a person except one thing: the freedom to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. He witnessed people in the camps, facing the same horrors, respond in radically different ways. Some collapsed into despair. Others found meaning, helped fellow prisoners, maintained their dignity. The circumstances were identical. The inner response was not. This is where mental discipline becomes not just practical but existential. You are not disciplining your mind merely to be more productive or to avoid emotional pain. You are disciplining your mind to reclaim authorship of your own life. Because most people, if they are honest, are living scripts written by others. Their values were inherited. Their fears were taught. Their desires were implanted by culture, by advertising, by the expectations of people they do not even respect. The disciplined mind asks, is this actually mine? Do I actually want this? Or have I simply been conditioned to want it? Let us go deeper into what this means in practice. Consider ambition. You are told from a young age that you must achieve, must accumulate, must climb. And so you do. You work long hours, sacrifice relationships, postpone rest, always reaching for the next milestone. But the next milestone, when reached, does not bring the peace you expected. It brings only the next milestone. The Stoics called this the hedonic treadmill, though they used different language. Seneca observed that people who chase wealth and status are like men drinking seawater. The more they consume, the thirstier they become. Mental discipline requires you to step off the treadmill and ask a harder question. What is enough? Not what society says is enough. Not what your parents expected. Not what your wealthier neighbor has achieved. What is enough for you according to your own examined values? This is not a call to abandon ambition. It is a call to interrogate it, to distinguish between ambition that serves your growth and ambition that serves your ego's endless hunger for validation. The disciplined mind pursues goals, yes, but it does not outsource its sense of worth to outcomes. It finds satisfaction in the effort, in the craft, in the virtue of the work itself, regardless of applause. This is what the Stoics meant by amor fati, the love of fate, not passive acceptance, but active embrace. You do your best, you engage fully, and then you release attachment to results. Because the results were never fully within your control to begin with. Here is another reversal. The people you think are mentally strong because they never show weakness are often the most fragile. True strength is not the suppression of vulnerability. It is the integration of it. The Stoic sage was not a robot devoid of feeling. He felt fear, grief, disappointment as intensely as anyone. The difference was in his relationship to those feelings. He did not identify with them. He observed them as weather passing through his inner landscape. Noted, acknowledged, not denied, but not obeyed. This distinction is everything. When fear arises, the weak mind says, I am afraid, therefore I cannot act. The disciplined mind says, fear is present, and I will act anyway. Consider the student preparing for a difficult exam. Anxiety is natural, perhaps even useful in small doses. The undisciplined student lets that anxiety spiral into catastrophizing, sleepless nights, paralysis. The disciplined student notices the anxiety, names it, and then asks, what does my best preparation look like despite this feeling? The feeling does not disappear, but it no longer dictates behavior. This is the subtle art of diffusion, a concept found both in ancient Stoicism and in modern acceptance and commitment therapy. You learn to separate yourself from your mental content. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that observes thoughts. Now let us speak about failure, because this is where most people's mental discipline collapses. Failure in the modern world has been pathologized. We are taught that it reflects inadequacy, that it must be hidden, that repeated failure is evidence of something fundamentally wrong with us. The Stoics saw failure entirely differently. They saw it as information, as refinement, as the cost of attempting anything worthwhile. Epictetus taught his students that every difficulty is an opportunity to practice virtue. Patience when things are slow, courage when things are frightening, resourcefulness when things fall apart. The event itself is neutral. Your response is where virtue lives. Think of Thomas Edison, who famously said he did not fail 1,000 times in creating the light bulb, but rather found 1,000 ways that did not work. This was not mere optimism. It was a disciplined reframing rooted in Stoic logic. If your goal is learning and improvement, then so-called failure is not failure at all. It is data. It is progress. The only true failure is refusing to try again or refusing to extract the lesson. The disciplined mind treats every setback as a question. What can this teach me? What can I do differently? What is still within my control? But let us address the exhaustion many of you feel, because mental discipline is not, as some misinterpret it, the same as relentless hustle or self-punishment. There is a profound difference between discipline and rigidity. The rigid mind says, I must follow my plan no matter what. The disciplined mind says, I will follow my principles while adapting to reality. The Stoics understood that life is flux, that circumstances change, that what worked yesterday may not work today. They practiced flexibility within a firm ethical framework. The framework: virtue, reason, acceptance. The flexibility: tactics, methods, timing. This is crucial for the modern person drowning in productivity advice and self-optimization culture. You are told to wake at 5, to meditate for an hour, to exercise rigorously, to read 50 books a year, to network constantly. And if you fail at any of this, you are told you lack discipline. But perhaps the problem is not your discipline. Perhaps the problem is that you are trying to live someone else's life. Marcus Aurelius did not have a morning routine because some guru told him to. He had practices that supported his ability to rule justly and maintain his sanity under crushing responsibility. Your practices should serve your life, not the other way around. The disciplined mind is ruthlessly practical. It asks, does this actually help me live according to my values? Or am I just collecting credentials of self-improvement? Here is another layer. Mental discipline requires you to become comfortable with being misunderstood. The world rewards conformity, speed, immediate gratification. If you choose depth over speed, if you choose integrity over popularity, if you choose inner peace over external success, many people will not understand. Some will judge you. Others will project their own insecurities onto your choices. The undisciplined mind bends under this social pressure. It needs approval, needs to fit in, needs to be seen as successful by conventional metrics. The disciplined mind accepts that living according to reason and virtue will sometimes make you an outsider. And it makes peace with that. Seneca wrote to a friend, if you live according to nature, you will never be poor. If you live according to opinion, you will never be rich. Living according to nature, in Stoic terms, means living according to reason, virtue, and acceptance of what is. Living according to opinion means endlessly chasing what others think you should want. One path leads to sufficiency and peace. The other leads to endless striving and perpetual dissatisfaction. The disciplined mind chooses the former, even when the latter is louder and more seductive. Let us now address fear, because fear is the mechanism by which most people are controlled. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of loss, fear of death. The undisciplined mind is ruled by fear, constantly making decisions to avoid discomfort rather than to pursue what matters. The disciplined mind does not eliminate fear. That would be impossible and perhaps undesirable, as fear contains useful information. But it refuses to let fear be the primary author of its choices. The Stoics practiced negative visualization, imagining loss, imagining death, not to become morbid but to reduce fear's power. When you have mentally rehearsed the worst, when you have accepted that loss is part of life, fear loses its paralyzing grip. Imagine you are about to have a difficult conversation with someone you care about, a conversation that might damage the relationship but needs to happen for integrity's sake. Fear will arise. The undisciplined response is avoidance. Delay the conversation, soften the truth, prioritize comfort over honesty. The disciplined response is preparation. Clarity about your values, acceptance that you cannot control the other person's reaction, and courage to speak even when your voice shakes. The outcome may not be what you hoped, but you will have acted in alignment with your principles, and that alignment is where self-respect is built. This brings us to a paradox at the heart of mental discipline: control through surrender. You gain power by releasing the need to control everything. The more you try to micromanage outcomes, other people, the future, the more anxious and exhausted you become. Because most of life is fundamentally beyond your control. The weather, the economy, Other people's thoughts, the past, the future, aging, loss, all of it outside your command. The disciplined mind focuses its energy on the tiny sphere of actual control. Your choices, your effort, your perspective, your integrity. Everything else, you do your best and then let go. This is not passivity. It is strategic focus. Think of an archer. She controls her stance, her aim, her release of the arrow. But once the arrow leaves the bow, it is subject to wind, to gravity, to factors beyond her. If she obsesses over the arrow in flight, she loses focus on the next shot. The disciplined archer does her best and releases attachment. This is the Stoic practice of reserve clause. You set intentions. I will prepare thoroughly for this presentation. But you add, fate permitting. You acknowledge from the start that the outcome is not entirely yours to command. This removes the illusion of total control, and with it, the crushing weight of responsibility for things beyond your influence. Let us bring this home to your daily emotional life. You feel anger because someone disrespected you. You feel jealousy because someone has what you want. You feel anxiety because the future is uncertain. These emotions are not wrong or bad. They are signals, information about what you care about. But the undisciplined mind takes these emotions as commands. I feel angry, therefore I must lash out. I feel anxious, therefore something terrible must be about to happen. The disciplined mind observes the emotion and asks, is this emotion offering me useful information, or is it distorting reality? Does acting on this feeling serve my long-term values, or only my short-term comfort? Imagine you are stuck behind someone walking slowly on a narrow sidewalk. Irritation rises. The undisciplined mind narrates, this person is inconsiderate. They should move. Why are they so oblivious? The disciplined mind catches this narrative and recognizes it as a story, not a fact. Perhaps the person is elderly. Perhaps they are in pain. Perhaps they are lost in grief. You do not know. And more importantly, their pace, whatever its cause, is not actually harming you. The irritation is yours, generated by the gap between your expectation and reality. When you see this clearly, the irritation often dissolves. Not because you forced it away, but because you stopped feeding it with narrative. The Stoics called this objectively describing events. Strip away interpretation and see what is actually happening. Not, this person is rude, but this person is walking slowly. Not, my life is a disaster, but I lost my job and need to find another. Not, I am a failure, but I attempted something and it did not work this time. These neutral descriptions do not deny difficulty. They simply remove the emotional amplification that turns pain into suffering. And in that space between event and interpretation, you find freedom. Now, as we near the end, consider what you will carry forward. Mental discipline is not a destination. It is a practice, a daily return to principles when you drift. And you will drift. You will react emotionally. You will get caught in old patterns. You will forget, in moments of stress, everything you know. This is human. The disciplined mind does not demand perfection. It demands return. When you notice you have been swept away by anger or fear or craving, you simply return. No self-flagellation, no drama, just return. The greatest gift of this practice is not that life becomes easier. It is that you become more capable of meeting life as it is. You stop waiting for circumstances to change before you allow yourself peace. You stop outsourcing your contentment to achievements, possessions, or other people's approval. You find a ground within yourself that external chaos cannot shake. Not because you are invulnerable, but because you have learned where your true power resides. Not in controlling the world, but in governing your response to it. So I leave you not with a summary, but with a question, one the Stoics ask daily. What is the good life? Not the successful life, not the impressive life, but the good life. And is the life you are living now aligned with your answer? Mental discipline is what allows you to close that gap, not someday but today in this moment with this choice. The strong are not those who never struggle. The strong are those who struggle and choose, again and again, to act according to reason and virtue despite the struggle. That choice, renewed each morning, each hour, each breath, is the only discipline that truly matters.